made my peace with fear, I guess. I realised that everybody gets scared. There's no way of avoiding that. It's reality, which means that you have to befriend fear and just do it scared.
Venom Computers. This is Intelligent Performance.
Paul Pritchard, welcome to the Intelligent Performance Podcast. An absolute pleasure to have you here on the show. For those who don't know Paul, he was an experienced climber guiding people all across Snowdonia and climbing some of the most impressive mountain structures all around the world. And Paul, today you're here to talk about your message and how an accident when you were climbing has changed your perspective. So Paul, massive welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to us.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be here.
So Paul, you've got one of the most interesting stories I've probably ever come across. It goes back to where you were climbing one of the very impressive and highly dangerous climbs in Tasmania. Talk to us a little bit about, what were you trying to do and why was this such a important milestone for you to climb this structure?
Well, I was a professional climber back in the UK, and this thing in Tasmania, it's incredible. It's 65 meters high and only 4 meters wide. It's so slender that it sways slightly when you're standing on top of it. Some say that it's the most slender piece of sea stack, a needle of rock, and that it's the most slender sea stack in the world. And when I say we, me and my partner, girlfriend, Celia Bull, were trying to do the second free ascent of this climb. Back in 1998, it had only been climbed once. And there's an element of real adventure about it that was, so compelling. And, you have to walk for couple of hours to get out to this cape, and then you have to descend down to sea level and then rock up across to it because it was at low tide.
Wow.
Do you want to hear my story?
Certainly, Paul. Yes, just take us through it, because it sounds like an adventure just to get to this place.
Oh, it is.
And then there's the climb. So yes, certainly. Tell us what happened from there on. Like where, and this is what's really powerful about your whole story.
I must say that the Totem Pole, its name is on Cape Hoy, which is part of the Three Capes track on the Tasman Peninsula, not far from Port Arthur, which is quite a famous,
very beautiful place too.
Penitentiary. Celia went up to the Arthway ledge, and I was following. I didn't even feel it. I didn't hear it, but a rock hit me on the head. Years later, I found that it was the same dimensions as a laptop computer. I was hanging upside down, just a meter above the sea. Celia had to rope down to me, get me upright in slings, and then climb back up the rope to the ledge, and then haul me 30 meters up to this ledge, up a vertical wall, a bit like hauling a dead body up a block of flats, really. And it's really hard work it's actually superhuman effort to do that. The rope is only 9 millimeters wide and it's nylon, so hands were bleeding by the time she got me there. Only me and her down there. It was in the days before mobile phones, 1998. She had to leave me alone, get herself off the totem pole, climb a portion of the cliffs opposite on her own, and then run 7 kilometers for help to a ranger station. From the rock hitting me on the head to hearing a helicopter was 10 hours. To stay awake, because I thought if I did go to sleep, it would be the last sleep I ever made. But I did lose consciousness for about 2 hours at a time, probably.
Wow.
And
so you were saying that it resulted in being airlifted off this totem pole, from what I recall.
The paramedic who I still climb with came down to me and I thought he was in for a simple corpse recovery, judging the amount of blood on the ledge. And when he saw that I was still alive, he knew there was no time to lose and put a neck brace on me. I remember the neck brace being fitted and it was really painful. And then he clipped me to his harness and we both roped down into a waiting kind of tinny that was acting as a lifeboat.
Right.
Hours later, the sea had got up and the tinny was rising up and down like on the swell, 2 meters. And so on the upsurge of the tinny, he had to cut the rope and we both fell into the boat. Yeah.
Wow.
And then we sped to Fortescue Bay, kind of a lovely beach where there was a waiting helicopter. And I finally got into the doors of the hospital. I was hypothermic and I'd lost half my blood.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really lucky to be here. You know, I give thanks every day for being alive. The world's just kind of really, I feel like I'm in heaven.
It's a lovely perspective to have, incredible gratitude when you go through. I can only imagine what it must be like to be on the absolute brink, Paul, and then to experience that kind of coming back every day would feel like an absolute gift. So tell me, in terms of the recovery, that was the beginning of a very long path for you, right? You had to rediscover, just create half your blood. That was a key part. And then you lost the ability to talk. You had severe brain injury. What was the prognosis at that point? Obviously, it would have looked pretty bleak for some time, I would imagine.
Yeah, nobody really knows with brain injury what the hell's going on, like what the prognosis is. It can be different for everybody. But I was in hospital for a year in Liverpool and I had to learn how to walk again. I was in a wheelchair for 9 months, walking a couple of paces further each week in the physio gym. And I had to learn how to talk again. I was non-verbal for many months. That was not because of the mechanics of my mouth. I had to actually learn English again, basically.
Wow. Incredible.
And, just things like having to get dressed up. Before they let me out, I had to prove that I was capable of living alone. There was a kitchen in the rehab centre where I had to cook a meal. I cooked chili tofu. Eventually, after about 9 months, they started letting me go home on weekend release, gradually seeing if I was capable of living a life. I should say that my partner, Celia, me and her ways, kind of about 5 months into my stay in the rehab centre. That was really hard. She got her own traumas from the rescue and we're great friends now. It's like 26 years ago. 80% of relationships with brain injuries last because the whole dynamic changes, doesn't it? I guess one person becomes a carer.
Yeah.
And one person with a brain injury, the personality changes quite often.
If we fast forward a little bit, what I'm curious about is how you started to have an urge to go back to what had caused you such problematic situation in terms of that you were in, right? In terms of your injury. Tell me, what was it inside of you that had that urge to return to something which had been so traumatic? Because maybe for some people it would have been, I never want to do that ever again.
Yeah, I think there might be some people like that. For me, it was simple, really. If you're a chef, you would want to get back to cooking great meals again, and nobody would stop you doing that. And if you were a stamp collector, nobody would stop you doing that either. Climbing wasn't just my hobby. It was a job. I was a mountain guide. So it was a job and a passion. And it's great when your job's your passion, isn't it? It was my life. A lot of people in the medical profession were quite dismissive, thought that I shouldn't be taking these risks. And so it was a struggle to get back to that because of society really pulling me back.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what created for me this whole philosophy about the dignity of risk. Yeah.
So let's dive into that, because most people were probably a bit flippant about risk, perhaps. But let's dial specifically. You're talking mainly about disability, from what I recall, Paul, in terms of how providing or giving them an opportunity for risk, or are you talking about a broader perspective about the importance of exposing our children, people, our employees to risk?
I think it's all the same. Risk is just making a decision, whether that be going for a job or asking a person out on a date. I remember I would get nervous there and maybe not follow through. I feel like I am free of all that now. I don't actually mind appearing like I don't know what my next word is going to be, because of that, I make my living now from teaching people about that.
When you say you teach people now about this, what would you say is your main message?
My main message really is focusing on disabled people. That is who I mainly talk to. It is just to make that decision and take that risk. I know somebody who lived in a share house, non-verbal, in an electric wheelchair, and he just wanted to go to town and argued for that. The other people in the house or the support workers thought that it was too much risk. After 6 months, he did go to town on his own. This is a really good example of what I'm talking about when I say the dignity of risk. First of all, he went with a support worker shadowing him. And then he went on his own, but with all these cards. So the card would say toilet or his address, or, so, and he actually, and after 6 months, he did actually achieve that simple dream. But that was what he wants. What I am advocating for here is not so. What I do is very extreme dignity of risk compared to what I'm actually talking about.
Let's talk exactly about that, because you're very much leading from the front here in terms of what you're trying to get at, right? And that is that you've actually returned to the totem pole, and it became this thing for you that you felt like you hadn't maybe conquered it. Would that be the right way to put it, Paul?
Do you know what? Climbers don't like the word conquer. It's not really about having one up on the mountain, but it's common for people to say conquer, isn't it? I was going there on my anniversary of my accident every year, sitting on top of the headlander, looking at the Totem Pole. About 5 years before I actually climbed it, I started to think maybe I could do this thing, but I would have to find a way of climbing a rope with one hand and 1 foot, which is, the normal way is 2 hands, 2 feet, and you've got these clamps that slide up the rope but not down, so you can slide up and pull. So I trained, and I developed, me and my friend developed the technique with a pulley system. I found that I could climb a rope for 30 meters. It's split in two by a ledge, so I only had to climb 30 meters before a good rest. This whole thing took about 5 years. It wasn't just waking up one morning and thinking, I'll climb the totem. For ages, I couldn't even walk out. I had to be entered into place the first time that I tried it, but that was a BBC film. Yeah.
And tell me, Paul, at the end of it, when you actually did reach the top, and there's this epic video which you see in your TED Talk about you reaching the top of the totem pole, or at least what appears to be a ledge or a significant kind of area you can stand up. What was that like for you, actually getting there? Which would have been, I assume, the first time. Well, maybe the second time.
Yeah, no, it was the first time.
First time.
It was a cathartic experience, if you know what I mean. It felt like a loop had been closed. 18 years. And, I do say that in that accident, I was reborn. Not many people have the chance to live two completely distinct lives. It's what it seems to me. And 18 years later, it felt like my 18th birthday when I reached the top. The rock that hit me was at the same dimensions as a laptop computer. I felt the rock scar where the rock had fallen from. And that's when I realized I realised it was like a slither of rock climbing up onto that ledge. I originally couldn't get over the ledge, and I still have this recurring image or dream of me with just my torso over the ledge, but my legs still hanging below it. The knot was at my waist, and Celia's screaming at me. She's going, "You're going to have to help me here if we're going to get you out of this." That's the first time that I realised I'd done something really bad to myself. My leg wouldn't work and my arm wouldn't work. It felt like a corpse's leg or something. That when I was climbing up there the second time, I had this distinct, almost like illusion of that moment. Therapy, really good therapy.
One way to look at it, for sure. It's funny looking at how we think about risk these days. Arguably, as in this podcast, as we look at intelligent performance, and it's looking at trying to evaluate or look at the world in a certain way, which can help you achieve marginal gains. What you're talking about is rethinking how you think about risk, and actually that sometimes we can think as risk as bad or as negative or as should be avoided, especially when it comes to, as you mentioned, disabled people. You want to maybe protect them. But what you're saying conversely is there's real dignity, there's real honor, there's real opportunity, and we shouldn't protect people from life, which stood out for me when it comes to your TED Talk.
Yeah. I actually run a course where I teach people in real time how to start by abseiling down a rock. Before that, I teach them what risk and decision making mean. And we go for a meditation and a silent walk out to the cliff. And then we abseil down a rock. The next day, we actually climb up the rock. And what I'm trying to do there is, it's existential. It's actually talking. What I'm trying to do is say, don't be scared of death, because it's just part of life and everybody's got to go through it. That's really what I'm trying to say. I call it fear therapy. That is, to me, the most prescient in our life.
Wow, what a message.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly powerful. How many people, if you look at their behavior, are driven by fear? The fear of losing income, the fear of chasing their dream, the fear of giving up, or the fear of breaking up with their partner because they might end up single for the rest of life. You've gone through all of that, and now you're on the other side, and now you're like, it's okay. Don't live in fear.
Exactly. All human endeavors are driven by fear of death. And that's kind of quite something.
Paul, that's a great place to leave this conversation. Thank you so much for your, wow, I'm even struggling to say, like almost like a refreshing take on life. And it's so interesting that someone who's come so close to death is living more fully than what most people do anyway. And so I just wanted to say thank you, Paul. It's been inspiring stories I've ever come across. So yeah, Paul Pritchard, we'll link to your website, to your bio, and if people can reach you, follow the links in the description below. But thank you again, Paul. It's been incredible.
Thanks, Michael. Really good to meet you.